I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions before the 6:30 kind of gathering in this space. But if there's any others, feel free to ask. If not, maybe we just continue it a little more informally.
A quick question to everyone. I'm curious to know about the concept, this masculinity concept of the leaders of the jam sessions. If it's actually perpetuated nowadays in the academic environment more than if it's taught and perpetuated in the academic environment rather than on clubs or places where the jam sessions happen.
What do you mean by it? What is it?
I'm sorry?
When you said it, just want to clarify.
Oh, yes, the masculinity concept of leading a jam session, of how, including etiquette, the etiquette of how to behave in a jam session. That's how I'm calling it.
Yeah, I think chops battles are way too normalized. Such a ridiculous thing. I think that's also stems from a masculinity thing, like of who's gonna come out on top, who can play louder, higher, faster, more notes, and who's gonna be the king of the saxophone tonight. Is it gonna be and if you win, you get a free trick from the bar. Like it's really like the little things like that stem that. I think also like the masculinity part comes from just like the sheer like numbers and like the sheer demographic of wherever you are. Like when I literally told us to look around the room last time, that was a demographic check. Like you go to your jam session, look around the room, what's your demographic check? That will almost guarantee you what you're gonna get out of that space, right? So if you go to a jam session, all you see are all the guys who just came from the same class at Juilliard and rode the 2 train down to Smalls. That's what you're gonna get. You're gonna get that. Not saying that's bad or positive, but that's what you're going to get, right? So I do think that masculinity thing is absolutely, I think even in my jam session, the first couple of months that we had were very male heavy. I think it still kind of is.
Yeah.
And it's like, every day I ask, I'm like, well, I'm leading the session. I'm a Black woman. Why aren't there more Black women showing up? Like, how do I do that? Every other week I text and call. Hey, you want to come to session? Oh, we'll do a drink, whatever, like, let's come hang. It's really hard. It's really hard because I think, and this is not saying that, Black women or Black people are a monolith, but there's a certain level of thinking and preservation that Black people, I think, like to have when entering these spaces. So sometimes they rather stay home. And I get it. For a while, I hated jam sessions and did not go. I would only go if a friend said, hey, come sit in on the last song and then hang for the session, or like if I was already there or in the neighborhood, but I wouldn't go out of my way to go for sessions. So to not answer your question, but to address it, I absolutely do think that, the masculinity thing is there. I think it's probably going to be there for a while until we really balance the gender equity situation, which is a whole another conversation I'm sure that we can talk about for days on end. But yeah, I still think it's there. I still think it's real and a hard issue to kind of grasp at.
As a saxophonist, I'm paid by the note, so I'm not sure any other way to play jam session. I think you raised some really valid points. As someone who has worked in academia, I've never heard someone vocalize like leading a jam session as being a masculine endeavor. So I've not actually heard that language formally tagged, I suppose. So maybe I'll begin there. There's a really fascinating article, and I know there's scholars who do contend with masculinity in jazz and sort of its deconstruction. I'm reminded of the work of Robert Walzer, for example. And the literature is rich in terms of jazz studies. I think it's unfortunate that you have to know where to find it, where to access it. For example, in the preparation for this panel, I was trying to look for the earliest example I could find of someone writing about jam sessions. And it turns out it goes all the way back to 1954. We've been talking about this and spilling ink for this for a long time, but unfortunately, academics have a really uncanny way of only communicating with each other, and I would love to see that change. I'd love to see those articles and books, more information, not gatekept in the ways that it is currently. There's been a really interesting and important push to observe with women in jazz academia. And I'm reminded of the recent publication by Berkeley of a Women in Jazz Composers Songbook, which I think is deeply important. I'm saddened that we don't use that book though to change the repertoire at jam sessions. So you know what I mean? Like it's not like all of a sudden we're hearing Maria Schneider tunes and Tia Fuller tunes, right? Like there's a disconnect, and it's because, in my opinion, or one of the reasons for this disconnect, I think, is like we're not ourselves, and I'm taking responsibility for myself too. We're not calling these tunes. We're not, you know what I mean? Like we're not changing the repertoire and changing the conversation by changing the repertoire. And I think we, and I'll take responsibility for myself. I could do more in that context. I think we could pay women to be leaders at jam sessions. Like if we want to see women leading jam sessions, we should pay them. We should have them running jam sessions. We should be giving women and people of color and marginalized communities historically in the jazz culture opportunities to do that. If we want to see less men running jam sessions, we should pay a larger diversity of people to run those sessions. And then I'll also just say, this is something that I really had never given a great deal of thought about until the last couple of days, but the implied violence in the language of jazz. You know what I mean? I said cutting sessions earlier. I mean, what do we say when someone's doing a great job? It's killing. Yeah, like we all know that. I think that for me, in terms of like where I locate that, it's post World War II. It's a fairly new idea, and like we have to, contend with the fact that like there were, men coming back from, really violent and ghastly experiences post World War II to New York City, who were dealing with a great deal of trauma that, most likely went unresolved in a lot of cases. That impacted the music, that impacted the language, and it impacts, us all, right? We all carry the echoes of those scars. All of us here, I'm sure, can talk about the scars that have been inflicted upon us at jam sessions. And I'm sure intentionally or unintentionally, we've passed those on, to students who will, have their own next gen session to deal with their, experiences, their negative experiences of us all. So I think, there's opportunities for us to remedy our upbringing in the music and do better, right, for the people that are coming up after us. And, I think like we're all open to continuing this conversation, I think, in a multitude of different ways after this panel.
Hey, John, you and I talked about something really interesting early on. April 9th, 1865 was the end of the Civil War. So all of these servicemen, Black servicemen, looking for work, had nothing to do. It turns out there was a surplus of instruments, brass, that was sold to them through the military. So they developed these bands all over the South, Texas, New Orleans, across the, Mississippi, all these different places. So it seems like the music might have always been a little male heavy. I mean, from day one, even when you go back to like Buddy Bolden and all those cats from New Orleans, and women, there was a female big band. Now the Andrews sisters have a band, didn't they? Yeah. And who was that sister? The women that Ella Fitzgerald listened to them and learned how to sing from her. There was a group of sisters. They all had. Thank you. They had a band, and then you have Mary Lou Williams and all these women. It always seemed to have been a bit male heavy, but I even remember where, a couple of years ago, Jazz at Lincoln Center, people complained about why you don't have women in the band. And it was, they stated it was essentially Duke Ellington, but then Camille Thurman joined the band, right? So it's kind of always been male, even today in the industry, whether it's jazz or whatever, the people that are running it, it's like, I don't know, man. I mean, you are getting some women that are doing, I think Christian McBride's wife is, doing a lot of great stuff. But, and we gotta get women to come out more, because maybe some of us might have been, decided it's too much, it's too much.
It's just safety thing too.
Yeah.
Like there is such a lack of safety for young women to be out in the scene. Like it is so easily to be sexually assaulted as a young woman at a jam session, like so easily. It could be just a phrase that someone says to you, a hand being touched too low, someone putting something in a drink. It is literally like unsafe for women to show up in the middle of the night, as far as going from the north side to the south side, or from Queens to Brooklyn to get to a session on your own in a new city. If you haven't been here before, there's so many danger factors there. So I think now in this age where women have so much access to information really quickly, where you can be just like, oh, okay, I heard this, there's an issue here this week and this week and that week, and I don't want to, all right, I'm just going to stay home, it's kind of too much work. And even if you want to put on a nice outfit or put some makeup on, like, that also makes it even more unsafe for you. So even if you show up in a hoodie and sweatpants, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's also a big issue of lack of protection for young women in the scene, from older people, younger people, people their age, people younger than them. That it's coming from all angles.
You know, one other thing. Oh,
I'm sorry. But yeah, I would like to add, I am actually in a 9-piece female band. It's a great band. We got a little thing coming up next week. And, but those women, actually, I've been working with those women since 1980. Hit McClure, Clark, and Angelica Rogers. So we're there, but not in a numbers, and we actually have these kinds of conversations, like, we need more women in jazz, and but it does seem like it's in a good place, because I look at Singer Joy, and you have all these Georgia ears, and got a lot of great young musicians that are coming up, and these guys are not just singers, they're actually musicians. So I think, overall, I think jazz is in pretty good hands, but it's gonna be a struggle to see a big band mixed with as many women as there are. Actually, Swing 46, that big band, right? Got about 6 women in that big band, and I've been a part of the history of that band. So they do incorporate, and I think they're as tight as any other big band out there. It's a pretty solid band. But yeah, women, we have to kind of carve out a place for ourselves, because I don't think it's gonna be done for us. We gotta
That's a big
show up. Yeah.
a thought that I just had while we were talking about this. Can anyone think, and this is legitimately a question for everyone, because I'm struggling to think of a single example. Can you think of a woman jazz critic who? Because thank you. Okay, that's a great example. But I think my point being, I can't think of one off the top of my head, and that's a great example. But I think if we want to change jazz stories, we have to change the people telling them. And we have to, try and think about how we can create inclusive spaces for them. We're primarily talking about storytelling, myth making, and sort of narratives that are told from the perspective of men about men. And, if we don't have women telling the story of women in jazz, then we need to try and think about what it would take to make a space for that to be possible and to be more accessible. So I think that's a really interesting takeaway that we can all kind of chew on.
Yeah, I think also back to literature, just doesn't even have to be jazz critics, but just authors. There's so many Black women authors who speak about music. Just go to your nearest public library, get a library card, and start reading some damn books. And you'll get a lot of answers to these. Like, we're just repeating history over and over and over again with faster technology. I think everything that could have been done has almost already been done. We're just telling it from a different perspective, whether that be music, whether that be whatever industry you're in. We've already done it all. So it's like, go look at the history and then apply it to real time. I think that's a big thing. And I think also like we need to rely on like the community. If we're in spaces with a lot of men, like how can our men protect us better? How can they look at, I mean, sorry, not to like be like, and it's your fault, but it's like, as a woman and I go to a jam session, even if I go on tour with a band, like I want to know that if shit hits the fan, they got my back. That I'm protected, that I know that I have people who are gonna come to the rescue when I need someone to be there. But unfortunately, that's not being taught to the young men that play music currently. Like even if I'm wearing heels and I have to come up to the stage and there's some stairs, I better see somebody's hands so fast.
Oh yeah.
Or else we're gonna have an issue. Because how, you know what I'm saying? Like that kind of culture, it just hasn't been really reinstated in the current generation. I don't really see it in the generation above me anymore. Maybe in the old heads generation, they keep some of those kind of things, but it hasn't really trickled down in a way where it's substantial enough for young people to know that that's actually important. You're gonna have women in the band, make sure there's comfortable bathrooms for us to go to, make sure that we have someone to walk us to our car after the gig when it ends at 3:45 in the morning. Like what is your individual part that you can do as a man in this music to help better the culture? So that's my 2 cents. But anyways, I know we're over time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that. And we're happy to keep this conversation going. Just come up to us afterwards, all right? Thank you all for coming, and we'd like to convert the room over to the gathering.